Howdy, y'all. Back in about 1976, before I was a bass fisherman by a year or two, we catfished in the creek down by the house. And back in those days, we would put like night crawlers, worms, whatever, on a treble hook. And we knew, I was told as a kid, you couldn't put a weight right there at the treble hook because the fish would feel it. So you'd put it 12, 15 inches above it, and with a snap swivel, make a leader, and it was probably a pretty horrible rig, truthfully. But we were missing a lot of those fish. They'd pick the bait up and drop it. You'd see the line move. I bet you all have done that. And sometimes they'd never come back. And I think it was my dad said, well, they're feeling that weight. So I was thinking, well, we'll get that weight out of there. I remember I just did a double overhead granny knot on a treble hook and tied it probably, 15 inches above the weight. Tied the weight on the bottom, baited up, threw it out, and immediately started catching catfish. Like 100% better. They'd grab the bait, as long as you had a little bit of slack in line, they'd be hooked before they ever felt that weight. It was kind of a neat deal. Kind of like a drop shot. So what's that got to do with bass fishing and big plastic worms and a thing I'm going to call a DW rig? Well, I guess you need to hang around for a few seconds and find out. This is Hickbilly Outdoors with DW Verts coming right your way. Howdy, y'all. DW Verts, Hickbilly Outdoors here. We're going to talk a little bit today about fishing with big plastic worms. There was a deal made on the ultimatebass.com discussion forum last week by Bud Kennedy, and he asked about big plastic worms. He said he never had a cause to fish them, and want to know hows, the whys, the wheres, the reasons we fish those big worms. So I thought I'd try to get this done for you fairly quick today. Summertime, it's the middle of July, and that's the time for the big plastic worm. Those big bass, which is what we're fishing for with them. Bass definitely over 3 pounds. More for me, over 4 pounds, and I catch a lot of big, 4 to 7 pounders on this bait in the summertime. Metabolism of a bass changes as the water gets warmer. It gets to a point when it starts getting over 80 degrees that it has a tendency to not so much slow down, but it does change, especially for big bass. And what happens, in my opinion, and this is all my opinion, big bass start changing what they eat. They don't feed as often, and they eat bigger meals. They only have to eat a couple times a day that way. And since so many of them feed at night, that makes this bait a particularly good thing to try in the daytime. I think this bait intimidates them. I think it puts a whammy on them. Sometimes they can't resist. So I fish this bait in hot water. Unfortunately, this year it hadn't hardly been hot enough. You get a lot of short bites, a lot of yankers. I'm hoping this next time I get to go, they'll start biting a little bit better. But it is a big fish thing. When you put this bait on a rod, and you get out there and you get ready to do some damage, you just feel so confident that it's going to be a big fish that bites this. Now, you will catch, of course, small bass. Bass have big mouths. Bass are ignorant. They don't care. But you'll catch a fair number, and probably in the middle of summer, the best big bass bait I know is a 10 or 12-inch plastic worm. That's what I call a big plastic worm. It's 10, 12 inches, and they get quite a bit bigger than that. But the 10s and 12s are what I throw the most of. Brand-wise, everybody makes decent worms. This is a Docker of Custom Baits, dockerofcustombaits.com, made just for me in my own color. It's a 10-incher, just a normal U-shaped tail. That is a Bitters Baits 12-inch worm. I use their baits. They have really cool colors and good prices. I use their baits in 10s and 12 inches. I also use a Mr. Twister. They make a real good one. It's a hang 10. Um, the Berkeley Power Worm for years was a super go-to for me, and I still use those. And I like the old man's jelly worm it's a 12-inch worm. It's totally different than any of these, and I don't have any out here right now. It has a totally different kind of action. It's got its place too. So, getting on to how we do this real quick. I fish them with big hooks. This hook right here is a 7/0. I think it's a Berkeley Fusion. It's a pretty good size hook, of course, but we're talking about getting through a lot of meat, and we're talking about catching big bass. The 7/0 is probably about my favorite size. I do have some 8/0 hooks, just because I've got them. I've used them. It's really a heavy hook even compared to the 7/0. Um, I use them all the time, but I think the 7/0 is my favorite. And then when you get into a more of a presentation of casting the bait or fishing it in deeper water, I use a 6/0 a lot of times. The diameter helps get the hook set, and it makes the worm action a little bit different. But my number one way to fish this bait is flipping and pitching. And I do that in heaviest cover I can put one in: lily pads, grass, brush, lay down trees, just whatever I can get into. Boat docks, underneath, over tables. I'm looking for places big bass hide. Weight-wise, very simple. I use the lightest weight I can get away with. I think this big bait has a neat fall, even in shallow water. So if I can get away with an 1/8 ounce weight, I'll do that. I'm ready to go all the way up to the ounce, ounce and a half tungsten if I have to punch this thing through stuff. I let the fish tell me. I experiment a lot with weights. You can fish this thing weightless. It throws really good on a casting rod and swimming through stuff. I've done that in ponds. Oh my gosh, it's a big fish pond bait. But generally, when I'm flipping this bait, I start off, well, this week, for instance, if I get to go fishing, that's a 1/4 ounce weight. This one's, I'd rig this up, it's ready to go. 1/4 ounce weight, good place to start. I'm fishing a lot of lily pads, a little bit of grass, and I'm going to try to get it through there without messing around too much. That's a good place to start. I always peg my sinkers, especially flipping, and I do it the old-fashioned top secret way with a toothpick. Top secret, guys. It still works. If I need to pick my teeth, I can. Bobber stop, I can't pick my teeth, I don't think. Let me know on that, okay? But I'm going to do it my way that's worked for me for about 1,000 years. Well, probably 40 years. And I'm going to peg that thing with a old-fashioned toothpick. That braid, it's not going to hurt that braided line. Anyway, I'm going to fish this thing a lot this summer. Fishing the heaviest cover I can put it in 3 to 5 foot of water. I'm using a flipping stick. It's a Dobbin 765. It's a medium heavy flipping stick, but it doesn't mean it's not really heavy. But if it says flipping stick, they're heavier throughout the length, okay? I also use up to 8 foot heavies, depending on several situations. This is 30-pound braid. I'm going to fish this thing on braid almost exclusively. There's no reason not to. I'm putting in some pretty gnarly stuff. If I'm not flipping it, if I'm not fishing shallower water, if I'm fishing those brush piles and ledges out there and upwards to, I've caught bass 40, 45 foot deep on these things, I'm going to fish this thing on a little bit different setup. It's also a Dobbin's rod. This is a 734, 7 foot 3 inch 4 power, which for them is a medium heavy. Or no, I'm sorry, heavy. I could do this on a medium heavy, but that would be the lightest I would go. We're talking about 30 foot deep maybe in a brush pile, feeling the bite, getting a hook set, getting the fish out. It takes something to do that. You can't really whip around with a light rod. So again, this is 30-pound braid, and there'll be arguments over that. I don't care, guys. I've fished this 30-pound braid in very clear water. I've caught tons of bass on jigs and on these plastic worms down to, again, 35, 40 foot of water. I don't see any reason not to use it. No stretch, feel the bites, get the fish out of the cover. I've caught them on football head jigs and in 10 foot of water, in water you can almost see the bottom that deep. And I don't think the braid, if it's hurting me, it hadn't hurt me enough to keep me from doing it. So I'm always experimenting. My way is not the highway, it's my way. I'm always ready to learn something, but I'm going to keep using this braid. There'll be arguments against it. It doesn't matter. It's what I'm going to do until somebody shows me something better. Probably this week. The way I rig this thing, 85 of my time in deep water. I call it the DW rig. I'm not going to go into it right now. It's fairly entailed, but basically it's a big split shot. We're going to do a video just on this, the DW rig. It's something I'm pretty sure that I came up with years ago. It's a pretty interesting way to fish a plastic worm. It's basically just a fancy drop shot, and I'm not saying I invented a drop shot, although whatever. I can catch bass on these things from 0 foot of water. I've caught them on top, swimming it through the grass, all the way down to, again, 40, 45 foot. It's going to make a bigger fish average for you across the board. I'm not saying you're going to go out and catch world record trophies every time, but I catch a lot of 5 and 6 pound bass in the middle of summer on these baits. The other way I fish it is suspended fish in standing timber. Sometimes on boat docks, but especially standing timber, it takes 90-degree water for that to really work well. It has to be a hot, hot summer. I don't see it happening this year. We're in the middle of July and the water temperature is still in the low to mid 80s. So that's a cool technique when it works. It's a long drawn out grinding technique, but it's probably the best way to win tournaments on timbered lakes in summertime for me if it gets hot and the fish get suspended in those trees. It takes a lot of heat. We don't have that this year. So anyway, when I fish this week, hopefully I fish this week, I'm working on my boat. I'm working on my tiny bass boat that I've had since March and haven't worked on. It's got new deck in it today and trying to make some things happen. But if I get to fish, and I'm throwing 10-inch worm this week, it'll be starting off with this one. This Doc Irv Custom Baits 10-inch U-tail. It's a motor oil with black and red flake. It's my own color. It's just something playing with. I'm going to flip it on this 30 to 65 pound braid, and the heavy stuff I can put it in. I'm going to bounce it around. I'm going to shake it. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make the fish bite. Sometimes it's an initial fall thing. Sometimes you got to play with them, but more often than not on a big fish, when this bait lands in front of them and does that little bounce thing it does, and that tail gets to dancing, they hit it pretty quick. If they're not hitting it pretty quick, that's when I use a smaller worm or a creature bait or something like that. So that's kind of a quick overview. The big plastic worm needs to be part of your arsenal. I'm pretty sure it'll work all the way north, all the way south. It's a great night fishing bait. Man, does it catch a lot of big bass at night. And again, for bass over 3 pounds, and definitely over 4 pounds, it's kind of a key thing. One thing that would come close on a normal year would be maybe a frog, and that's not happening this year for me either for some reason. So hope that makes some sense to you. I'm going to cut this short. I got in trouble. I made this video yesterday. I made it too long. We're going to do another video, though, on my DW rig. I'm looking for get famous one way or the other. Guys, thanks for watching. My name is Dale Verts. Just be glad as heck that you're not me. Trust me, it's not a good thing most of the time. This is Hickbilly Outdoors. It's not Hillbilly because, guys, this ain't no hillbilly. You got to be kind of special to make this happen. This is Hickbilly. Thank y'all. God bless. Good luck.